please, Bordeaux and Burgundy, if you hear us, change. We will not spit this one. Huh?
We can spit too.
I haven't seen anybody spitting anyway.
A Grand Cru? No. Especially with Burgundy, I feel like Burgundy is my, very lovable and very friendly, but my ex. This is somebody...
It all went wrong at some point.
Yes, it all went wrong at some point.
In a way, you can divide all human palates, wine palates, into two sorts. There's the Burgundy palate, and then there's the Bordeaux palate.
So the first one will be from cooler climate.
So we celebrate Bordeaux with a Burgundy bottle.
It's also the death knell for people like Aigards and me, and you, Agnes, hoping to buy nice Burgundy from a top Grand Cru for ourselves.
As a wine lover, it's painful because you want to try these wines. You want to, understand and taste what is this all about, and you simply cannot do that. You have to choose either you pay your rent or you buy a bottle.
It's mad. It's insane.
So who wins at the end, Bordeaux or Burgundy?
Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Sediment, and welcome to our discussion series Talk Under the Wine. Today my guests are columnist at the Decanter and World of Fine Wine magazines and an author of a book, Drinking with Rivalries, Andrew Jefford.
Great to be with you, Agnes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine.
And Aigards Nords, a founder of Riga and Wine Champagne.
Yep, exactly. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming in this early morning. But I want to have this small ad pause, I guess, because Riga Wine and Champagne events that you organize. We have two events during the year.
Yes, the two big main events.
Yeah, so Wine of the Year and then Bubble Parade.
Yes, so it's usually, in spring we usually concentrate on champagne and bubbles in general. So it's a bubble parade, 4 or 5 days of enjoying beautiful bubbles and champagne, mostly here in Riga. And then fall time, it's top 100 wines, so our Wine of the Year competition, where Andrew is the head of the jury. And then we just had it like 2 days ago, and it was an amazing festival. So if you care for this sort of thing, you should come to Riga.
Absolutely.
At least twice a year.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to say that these events are top level. They are, I think, world class for sure. I've been, to other events as well. So I know, I would wish to say that I know what I'm saying or talking about. And please do not fear the language because majority of them are in English. So you are absolutely fine, just come. We're not talking in Latvian.
Indeed,
that
because
much.
we always have international experts like Andrew was visiting us this time, and he comes pretty much every year, but then in the springtime we have Peter Liam, who always is our guest of honor. So the English is as the main language of the festival. Yeah.
So that is not a barrier.
Thank you for the ad.
Yes. No, I really wanted to say that because that's absolutely true, and that's coming from my heart. But today we have a very interesting topic. When I first pitched it, I was not quite sure about it. So we wanted to talk about Burgundy, and we wanted to talk about Bordeaux. So Burgundy versus Bordeaux, or Bordeaux versus Burgundy. And then before we start our discussion, I thought I would just put out some information about these regions. And maybe we are mad talking about them. Maybe we are mad comparing them because, so Bordeaux, so land under the wines, right now we have just below 95,000. So it just drop below 100,000 hectares. Burgundy, land under the wines, around 25,000 hectares, so quarter of that. Principal grape varieties in Bordeaux. So we have Cabernet Sauvignon, we have Merlot, Cabernet Franc. So whites, we have Semillon and Sauvignon. And then in Burgundy, we have mostly two, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So nothing really that overlaps over there. In Bordeaux, we have oceanic climate, and in Burgundy, we have cool continental climate. So they are clearly very different wine regions. So why do we want to compare them? Why there are books written Bordeaux versus Burgundy if they are so different? That's a question to you, guests.
Do you want to go first, Aigards?
I can start, yeah. I think there are a couple of debate points, wine lovers always debate about. One is biodynamics. It used to be corks versus screw caps, It used to be I don't know what else, whether the wine is corked or not corked. You know, some of these themes where, you know, people can actually fight around the dinner table. And now, over the years, I think this topic of Bordeaux and Burgundy has also actually entered this sort of a status that it's, I find people arguing. I don't know why, because both of the regions are really great, but, you know, I find these both regions more and more dividing the lovers and haters into groups. So yes, it would be quite often that I would see people saying, yeah, Burgundy has gotten this or that, or Bordeaux has gotten this or that. So it is an interesting topic, and it's actually right now it's more, you know, more disappointing than ever, so to say. Yeah, because of all of the changes happening with Burgundy and with Bordeaux, I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think the reason we focus on them is because they are the two great red wine regions of France, and France is thought to be the great wine country. Yeah. So in a way, they're the two reference red wine styles almost for the whole world, globally speaking. I've always thought that in a way you can divide all human palates, wine palates, into two sorts. There's the Burgundy palate, in which case you're a little bit shy about tannin, but you tend to love acidity and freshness and vivacity. And then there's the Bordeaux palate, where you enjoy tannin and texture a lot, but you tend to be a little bit more shy about acidity. I think all palates kind of fall into one or the other. And nearly always when you speak to wine lovers, they generally have, as you both suggested, kind of quite strong opinions about each. They tend to go on one side or the other. Particularly, you know, when you start to ask what they buy, because what they buy that's the truth. That's what you really are committed to as a drinker. And people tend to buy more Burgundy than Bordeaux, or they tend to buy more Bordeaux than Burgundy. They betray their allegiances in that kind of way. So it's a lovely dichotomy. But of course, you're quite right to point out that they are enormously different. Perhaps we can explore some of those differences.
Now I don't know what to do, because I had this question at the very end. I have written here, you said that you believe that most drinkers would have preference to one or the other. So maybe we can just skip then now to this one. And do you both have a preference? Do you feel that you are part of that, those people who would choose to buy one or the other?
Yeah, well, certainly I feel like that, but especially with Burgundy, I feel like Burgundy is my, very lovable and very friendly, but my ex, this is somebody.
It all went wrong at some point.
Yeah, it all went wrong at some point. I really still love her. We see each other from time to time, and we kiss each other on cheeks, but really nothing happens. So this is like I've had some of the most wonderful moments with Burgundy, and I still do have them occasionally with especially with white Burgundy. Actually, we drank one last night, a Chevalier Montrachet, La Cabotte 2008 vintage from Bouchard, and it was just magnificent. One of those bottles you drool over and you dream about, etc. So, but then again, I know that from now on there will be plenty of bottles that will be disappoint me, and I will be again disappointed in my ex. So here you go. So that that's a kind of, but of course Burgundy is in my heart, as I guess in every French wine lover's heart. So it's at some point or another, anybody who is serious about wine will have gone through the stage of loving Burgundy and possibly also in the stage of hating Burgundy. So I think it's very strong. And Andrew, to emphasize on your point, I think I really like the point of Bordeaux palate and Burgundy palate. But we really have to think that probably this division into Bordeaux and Burgundy palate is also kind of an old school approach. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Another thing we might talk about is the aesthetic transformation of Bordeaux, both Bordeaux criticism and Bordeaux production since Robert Parker stepped off the stage in 2012, 2014, because that is dramatic. And in fact, the last hour before we came here, I was just whizzing through a few notes for top wines from 2022 and 2020. Let me just read out some of the language that I found. Okay, if you just think back to the Parker days, you know, Parker loved rich, voluptuous wines. Low acid was a point of praise. He loved flesh. He loved power. I mean, his palate was much broader than people made out. He also had a lot of love for the more fine-grained top Bordeaux wines, like Haut-Brion, for example. So he had a broad spectrum of appreciation, but broadly speaking, he wanted sensual generosity. Okay, these are now the terms you're going to hear. Vibrancy, intensity, tight, fresh, focused, precise, seamless purity, weightless, that's an interesting one for Bordeaux, unerringly precise. I don't know how you can be erringly precise, but anyway, unerringly precise, tightly wound, tense, symmetrical. These are all the sort of the new critical terms that people are using about Bordeaux, and the wines they're praising are wines which taste completely different. To, you know, if you think back to Bordeaux 2009, for example, was, you know, until 22, it was the last great ripe vintage, but that was still in the Parker heyday. And those wines are very soft and voluptuous and gentle and welcoming and embracing. And then we've had this extraordinary run of great vintages, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, and 22. Now, if you look at 16 and 19 and 20, those three vintages in particular, the aesthetics are completely different. When I tasted for World of Fine Wine magazine, the 2020 vintage, you know, I wrote at the end, if you were one of those Bordeaux drinkers who gave up on Bordeaux because you felt everything was overblown and too voluptuous and too powerful and too rich, and you switched to Burgundy at that point, as many drinkers did, because people wanted more freshness and vivacity and all these words I've just been quoting, then you should look again at Bordeaux, because 2020 is absolutely that. You know, there's all the symmetry you want. There's all the tightly wound flavors you can want. There's all the precision you could want.
Yeah, true.
So you're absolutely right to point out that there has been a big aesthetic transformation in terms of the way Bordeaux is made. I think maybe 2022 sort of recenters us a bit more, because that is genuinely a beautifully ripe vintage. But certainly with 16 and 19 and 20, things change significantly.
And the problem might be, I'm not sure it really is, but I think it might be that the Bordeaux lovers or haters, you know, they operate in their own little bubbles of, you know, friends, wine lovers, etc. So they might not even notice, you know, some of the cosmic changes or seismic changes you just discussed, because some of the people who were Bordeaux bashers, you know, a long time ago, they probably still are, and they So
but they will notice. The other interesting question is, you know, all those
drink for that actually, that they notice it.
Should we? Because I have opened one bottle, and I will later explain why I chose these bottles.
All right, okay.
So the first one will be from cooler climate, but it will.
So we celebrate Bordeaux with a Burgundy bottle.
Well, we just start with white, I guess. So this is.
I think it's a beautiful white.
I
can see from label.
To resume your point, I personally think that actually the broader Bordeaux market hasn't yet noticed this aesthetic transformation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because people tend to open their wines after 9 or 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think when they start to open the 2020s, expecting them to taste perhaps like 2009, they're in for a bit of a shock.
Yeah, they're absolutely in. And we had some magical Bordeaux tastings over the couple of years. A couple of the days here in Riga, and you know, some of the younger vintages we tried, all were like a great evidence that Bordeaux is, you know, it is changing.
And it has to change because it's in a big crisis of confidence and of appreciation in the market. For example, Bordeaux has completely lost younger drinkers, and it's also completely lost the sommelier community, and it's performing catastrophically badly without those gatekeepers and without that new cohort of drinkers. So Bordeaux has to change, and slowly, we can talk a little bit about some examples. It is beginning to change now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you touched the sommelier palate too, because for sommeliers, probably at this point, especially I'm judging, of course, the Baltic scene in general, but for me, some of them might not even have or ever had a Bordeaux or Burgundy palates. They might have a Wachau palate, or a Piedmont palate, because it's probably the building blocks, which used to be in the old days. You start with Bordeaux, you continue with Burgundy and Champagne, of course. Maybe they have fallen certainly out of fashion among the younger generation.
Yes, although I would still say my point about this being a universal distinction between palates applies, because to take the examples you just offered, one, if you like Jura wines, for example, you tend to like wines with quite acidity and quite a lot of edge to them. If you like Wachau wines, you tend to like unctuousness and richness.
Yeah, richness. Yeah.
So I think that pull between these two fundamental sorts of palate applies fairly universally.
Can I just add this one here, because that really resonated with me what you said. So I started my wine career when I was 18, 19, 20, and at that point, of course, I could not afford Burgundy or Bordeaux that much. So I would be looking into these fine wine regions like Wachau or Barolo, and this is where I could sneak in and taste something. So this is where I started. So maybe as maybe I am the one sommelier who actually started to develop my palate, through different doors. And only later, when you start to earn a bit more and you're not student anymore, you can start to afford and pick these wines and taste them. But at this point, they have become so expensive that I'm also, And
I think it also works, what you just said, it works the other way around. Because, as I mentioned, since Burgundy, white Burgundy, white Burgundy is still my wife, I would say so. But anyway, it's I would say that people who have fallen out of love with Burgundy probably will be turning to white Austria. In my case, it certainly is the case, because I cannot afford, to drink white Burgundy on a regular basis anymore. So, there is this little substitute in Austria, which is Wachau or Kremstal or Kamptal, which are producing some amazing bottles right now, and with value which is way better than Burgundy has, not ever, but, ever offered, during the last 10 years or so. And the same thing has happened for me moving from red Burgundy, for example, to Piedmont, which I really love. And again, it's a shift of regions, but within the same palate, as you said.
I realize I haven't myself yet answered Agnes's question. What is my palate? One thing I brought along today as a prop is this little book here. It goes back to, I think I picked it up in the late 1990s at La Mission Aubryon, when I was going through there doing en primeur tastings. And it's a little cellar book, so you can just see some of the pages perhaps there. I've written down everything that I've personally bought for myself and taken delivery of at home. And trust me, I've tried very hard with Burgundy, very hard indeed. I won't go through all the details because that would get a bit boring. But, I bought regularly quite good and sometimes even very good Burgundies and tried them. And I have to say, no wine category of all the ones I've bought has disappointed me more down the years than Burgundy, almost to the point where I could say I've had almost zero success with my Burgundy buying. We're tasting this wine. I haven't bought any white Burgundy for years and years and years. I can appreciate it. It has very lovely, finely crafted aromas, beautiful lime freshness and so on. Personally, I'm finding the palate a little bit too percussive, a little bit too acidic, a little bit too reductive, a little bit too tightly wound, if you want to use that term. What would I rather drink? Well, a couple of days ago we had dry white wine, Vieillevin version, 2020 vintage from Chateau in Bordeaux. A blend of Semillon and Sauvignon, given the same kind of beautiful barrel aging treatment that this wine would have had.
Yeah,
I much prefer that wine because it's just giving me a bit more generosity. I have a palate, a Bordeaux palate. Frankly, I'm No region has given me the pleasure that Bordeaux has given me over the last 35 years of thoughtful drinking than Bordeaux. And, you know, in the end of the day, that's what I prefer. I have to say, white Bordeaux is quite an interesting topic because it's been very neglected for many years. Now, last July, the last day in July, we had finally a Medoc white AOC appellation came into being. More and more people are beginning to produce white wine. I mentioned Chateau last time we went there. They told us that by 2030, they will be producing 2/3 dry wine.
Yep.
2/3 dry wine. This is one of the greatest Sauterne properties of all. As a Sauterne lover, I'm a little bit sad about that, but you have to respect, you know, they need to create their future, and that's what the market wants. And, of course, the other, you know, great white wine region in Bordeaux is Pessac-Léognan. And personally, I think Pessac-Léognan made a big mistake over the last 10, 15, 20 years in that it became a region where many wines were 100% Sauvignon, sometimes Sauvignon Gris as well as Sauvignon Blanc, but 100% Sauvignon. And to me, that's what happens when you listen too much to the market and not enough to your own palate and your own understanding of what the terroir can give you. Because for me, the great white Bordeaux blend is always a blend of Semillon, which gives you the richness and plumpness, and Sauvignon, which can freshen and brighten. That's just a little side reflection about white wine in Bordeaux. But to go back to Agnes's question, and I really have tried, but I have a a Bordeaux palate and not a Burgundy palate, I'm afraid.
Okay, at least you cleared that. Well, let's drink to Bordeaux then. Cheers.
Well, I appreciate this wine a lot. And it's beautifully made and it's completely on the zeitgeist. Absolutely. This is what the critics are wanting from white Burgundy at the moment, because it is symmetrical and focused and tightly wound and all those things. But to me, it just leaves me a little bit cold as a drinker when I drink that kind of balance.
And your story about white Bordeaux reminded me of one of my first visits to La Tour d'Argent in Paris, which means they have the most amazing Burgundy and Bordeaux cellar. Of course, Burgundy is their real treasure trove, but I couldn't really afford some of the most expensive white or red Burgundies or red Bordeaux, which are there. So, you know, white Bordeaux was a really good option there. I still remember the taste of 1990 Domaine de Chaulier Blanc for way less money than any of the top Grand Crus of Burgundy. Or to add to your point, I think it is not just overlooked but also underpriced. Especially when we're talking about the new Sudirot we just had a couple of days ago. It's very nicely priced compared to their Burgundy cousins.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you briefly mentioned, so we're going backwards now from my questions, but we're still ticking all the questions. That's good. So you briefly mentioned...
You have two anarchic guests, I'm afraid.
That sommeliers... yes, that's just the first class. The sommeliers, you said that the gatekeeping, you know, that... so you said that Bordeaux is missing from many restaurant wine lists as well. And I wanted to add that my channel, the No Sediment, whenever we publish something on Bordeaux, be it even white Bordeaux, and videos about white wine usually do very bad, but even it was white Bordeaux, all the videos do very well. So how do you both would explain that gap between what the public maybe expects and are curious about, and what the restaurants choose to feature and the sommeliers want to feature?
Well, for me, we have to introduce, perhaps to our viewers, the notion of La Place de Bordeaux. Most Bordeaux wine is sold through this thing called La Place, the marketplace. And basically, it's great for the proprietors because they can chill. They just hand the wine over to the négociant. The négociant take it, sell it all around the world, distribute it all around the world, and done and dusted. That's great. Except that it's a very good system for distributing, let's say, luxury wine around the world. The class growths of the Medoc or the top wines of the right bank, fantastic. You'll find it in Ecuador. You'll find it in Indonesia. It'll be there. They'll have taken it around the world. That's great. But who are the customers? what's the relationship? What's the bond with the person making the wine, the people making the wine, the craftsmen who are making the wine, the people who are getting their hands dirty in the vineyard? What's their bond with the customer or the gatekeeper in the case of the sommelier? It doesn't really exist. That system destroys those bonds. It doesn't permit those bonds to exist, at least in my experience. So the result is that sommeliers all around the world have become completely bored by Bordeaux because nobody talks to them from Bordeaux because they don't have that personal relationship. They have all these, wonderful, filthy-handed growers coming from the Jura and from, here, there, and everywhere, from Argentina, from Chile, whatever. People who are really involved in making wine, from Australia, from New Zealand. They come and talk to them. They come and visit them. They have a personal bond with them. Bordeaux, it's just, wine on a list. Okay, do we want that? Do we want that? No, we don't want that. As you suggest from your viewing figures, I think actually the market loves Bordeaux still. The market understands that perhaps it is the bullseye of all of the wine world. Everything in terms of balance, concentration, texture, depth, you can find it most centrally with Bordeaux. But the gatekeepers have become completely bored with it. And every year I judge, for example, a wine list competition in Australia. So I see all the top wine lists from Australia. I can guarantee that very often the Bordeaux section will be maybe 9 or 10 wines long, maybe even less. Jura will have 2 pages. The Loire will have 3 pages. Burgundy will have 10 pages. That is the difference. Even more surprisingly, every year I take a group of students to Bordeaux. We go around the Bordeaux region for a week. And we stay in Bordeaux, and we eat in restaurants in Bordeaux, and we're on a Bordeaux trip, so we want to drink Bordeaux. We have a real struggle to find good restaurants in Bordeaux with good Bordeaux wine lists. Even in Bordeaux, any kind of up-and-coming restaurant will be serving you more Loire wines and more Rhone wines than they will Bordeaux wines. It's amazing. How on earth have the proprietors let this happen? How have they allowed these relationships to decay to the extent they have? That's a real problem for them.
It's to add to your point, of course, we just awarded the stars and the awards to the best Baltic wine lists here in Riga, in Tallinn, and in Vilnius, and the best bar, like Truffle Pig, which is just around the corner. I don't think you will ever find a bottle of Bordeaux on their list. Yeah, so that is an indication. And to me personally, I still remember this one story, maybe shortly. I go to Berlin every year, and I love Berlin, and I love their restaurants and wine bars and their Märzen. And every year we have a tradition to visit Billy Wagner, who is a head sommelier and owner of Nobelhart Schmutzig, possibly one of Berlin's best places to eat and drink. But he used to work at Wine Bar Roots, which is a famous Berlin institution too. And so I started going to him first at Roots. And I remember very specifically, you had all the regions listed, and as soon as you open the Bordeaux page, and it is indicated in the content list, as soon as you open the Bordeaux page, it says it's a completely empty opening page. It says you can bring your Bordeaux bottle yourself. Isn't that a statement, right?
That's unbelievable.
That's what it said,
It's got that bad.
And that was already 10 years ago, but it was, but I still remember the story, and I was like,
so now he doesn't even have the pages.
Yeah, probably, and the wine list has changed, but it was, a very specific statement, what people are thinking about Bordeaux at that moment. So it is an indication of attitude, certainly.
But I feel it, as you said, from the sommeliers, from the people who maybe sell directly to the final consumer, not so much from the end consumer. I think
that's absolutely right. Yeah.
So maybe we, as an industry professionals and representatives, some of us have grown tired of Bordeaux, not necessarily the public.
Yeah. Well, of course, we go and visit Bordeaux, and we try to meet, but you will never meet an actual owner, because the owner is an insurance company or a big trust fund or a Japanese whiskey producer. But you will probably, of course, you will meet the winemakers, you will meet the people behind it. But you have to go to Bordeaux yourself. Bordeaux will never come to you. it's also the same as Burgundy, of course. But in Burgundy, you might expect the growers visiting, and it's just way more difficult right now to get any visits in Burgundy domains. That's a different topic, I guess.
Yes, I mean we should point that out. We're going to perhaps talk about the relative size of each region in vis-a-vis price in a minute, but it's quite true. You know, another reason why I've given up trying to visit grand domains in Burgundy is because it's just too difficult. Whereas in Bordeaux, okay, you might be met by some person whose job it is to take guests around, a host or a hostess, but at least you can get there and taste the wines and look at the vineyards and listen to the message, and you'll understand that they have put an enormous amount of effort into crafting absolutely the best wine that they can.
So sure,
they're accessible to that extent. It's just, unfortunately, it's not the kind of message or not the kind of interaction that's going to fire up a sommelier's imagination.
So, let's start from the beginning. This, at least, how I imagined this conversation to go. But it's good because it went its own flow. Actually, my very first question would be that there is a common idea that the conversations about great wines of Burgundy start with terroir, and then we move to the estate. And then when we talk about Bordeaux, we start about the estate. The conversation starts with the estate, and then we talk about the terroir. So how does that resonate with you? Do you think it is true today as well?
I like the way you put the question, because that's absolutely right. That's the way in. And of course, we follow the way in. We don't question it, but we should question it. And we should point out to ourselves that actually, you know, terroir, this wonderful word, which we all think we understand, it's the taste of a place in a wine, has a completely different meaning in Bordeaux and in Burgundy. Completely different, because the basis of everything, as you say, Agnes, in Bordeaux, is the property. Obviously, the 1855 classification is a property classification. So therefore, providing you're within your commune appellation, within Pauillac, within Saint-Julien, whatever, you're allowed to buy any land you want within that appellation, absorb it into your estate, put it into your Grand Vin if you really want. Nobody minds about that at all. The property is everything. And if you look at the size of most of the class growths, and notably the leading second growths, they've all more or less doubled in recent years in size, because they've been buying up all the little parcels all around them that were either unknown Chateau or Cru Bourgeois or whatever. And they've enormously expanded their offering. We have to point out that it's slightly different in Saint-Emilion, because in Saint-Emilion the classification is based on a classification of parcels, not property alone. But even in Saint-Emilion, very much the property is on the front foot. For example, the Chateau Aubryon now has a cluster of land in Saint-Emilion, Chateau Quintus, Quintus, and they put that together from 3 separate properties, amalgamated. Christian Moueix, the Moueix family, did exactly the same for Chateau Bel-Air-Monange, which is now 3 former properties have now come together in that one very fine property, I have to say. So even in Saint-Emilion, okay, you're only allowed to have your classified land for your Grand Cru, Premier Grand Cru Classé classification. The Saint-Emilion classification has to be based on land. And when Angelus was promoted, for example, it's now left the system, but when it was promoted, some of its land was excluded. Ditto for Trollon-Mondeau. It's not all Premier Grand Cru Classé. So there is a parcel element to it. Nonetheless, even there, the property is on the front foot. But, you know, if you, with a Burgundy hat on, with a Burgundy brain on, this is just ridiculous. It's absurd, because everything in Burgundy is based on minute classifications of climat by climat. Village wine, Premier Cru wine, Grand Cru wine, lieu-dit wine for village wine, which is sold under the individual vineyard name. And it's all, the parcel is everything. Yeah. And the idea that, you know, Genévrier, we tried yesterday from Meursault, is different from Charme, even though they're next door, is deeply, deeply wired into the Burgundy way of thinking about things. This does not exist in Bordeaux. Everything is down in the end to the ethics, the professional ethics of the proprietors. We're relying entirely on that for our understanding of terroir in Bordeaux.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that isn't it true that of course terroir is the main thing. You know, the vineyard is everything in Burgundy, but at the end of the day, it is still the producer which matters most, because we've had so many disappointing Grand Crus produced by some weak growers. Always liked this quote by our friend Michael Shustak, who said that the vineyards are always the pieces of music. For example, you would have Mozart's symphony, 40th Symphony, first G minor symphony, for example, and the producers would be various orchestras who play it, for example, and then you might have the Mozart symphony, performed by a Berlin Philharmonic, or you might have it performed by a school orchestra. So at the end of the day, probably
I like the school orchestra.
Probably you would love to that symphony to be performed with the Berlin Philharmonic. So at the end of the day, the terroir matters, and it's kind of the key to the region. But then you would really love to drink those specific vineyards at specific addresses, at specific producers.
And that was why when I wrote The New France, I entitled the Burgundy chapter Terroir's Dreamland, because actually what Burgundy is proposing to you is a dream. In other words, each climat with its own individual character is a sort of platonic ideal, and the fact is the dream is always failing, the ideal is always crumbling. When you come to taste it, it's very rare that you can actually taste everything that all the critics have said about a particular climat coming true in one particular wine, or at least it's very rare in my experience.
True.
We can decide if we want to keep this in, but it resonated because here, talking about the land and terroir. So we have one quote, and this author here, they say that, can anyone seriously imagine that a great violinist declaring that their interpretation of Beethoven concerto owes 10% to her talent and 90% to her Stradivarius. So the idea is that it is the winemaker, and apparently they have the Bordeaux palate who said that. Yeah. So the idea was that it is the estate that translates it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is why in Burgundy, I think, this is a point where we can come to prices. That most of the most demanded growers or producers are so tiny. Everybody wants a piece of that, of their production, and that's why the secondary market prices have just gone out of the roof. Yeah.
Well, but do you think that there could be that balance maybe could be shifting in either of these regions between the estate and the terroir?
Well, actually, I have to say, Bordeaux, as we've just outlined a little earlier in our conversation, has colossal problems, and it needs to address those. And in particular, it needs to do more with terroir. There needs to be a terroir message, a much more clear terroir message than there's been in the past. Of course, it's always problematic to try and tell that terroir message with your Grand Vin, because your Grand Vin is an assembly of all of your best wine in a particular season, and the exact source of the parcels might vary. So what many Bordeaux properties are now doing, anybody who follows Bordeaux will be familiar with this, very often they have two second wines now. And one second wine is a genuine second wine as we used to know it from Émile Pénaud days. In other words, it's what you put your less successful parcels in, your young vine material, that sort of thing. But then they also have a second wine, which is a single parcel wine. This parcel is generally set back a bit from the Gironde estuary, so it's a little bit further away from the estuary, slightly less good gravel mound land, and that becomes a terroir cuvée, as it were. I mean, Chateau Pichon-Baron, for example, it has Les Griffons, which is its classic second wine, but it also has Les Tourelles de Longueville, which is based on the Sainte-Anne parcel, which has set back further. It could never qualify for the Grand Vin because it's not quite good enough. And this, you see this a lot with many other properties as well, Les Poiferré, Les Lascasse, many others, Duclos Beaucaillou, Parmian, and so on. Even Chateau d'Urfort-Vivant, for example, has now completely given up with a second wine, no more second wine, but they have 3 single parcel wines. So terroir is beginning to creep into Bordeaux in that kind of way. And we've, over the last 2 or 3 days, we've been serving a wine from Côte de Castillon called Chateau, where the proprietor, or the Jean-Christophe Mayrou, who runs the domain on behalf of the proprietor, has decided to make not a single wine, but 2 particular wines. One is called Les Argileuses, one is called Les Rocheuses. So Les Argileuses is from clay parcels, Les Rocheuses is from rockier limestone parcels. It's exactly the same blend, basically 80 Merlot, 20 Cabernet Franc, something like that, entirely unoaked, no oak at all, so the fruit is what you're tasting, and it goes to market in a Bordeaux-shaped bottle. So this is a completely different...
You said Bordeaux?
Sorry, goes to market in a Burgundy-shaped bottle. Apologies, thanks for picking up on that. So it's a completely different proposition. And indeed, when I first tried that wine, it was brought to me by a master of wine friend who came to dinner, and we were trying some Northern Rhone wines, and she just put this wine in with the Northern Rhone wines, and I just couldn't make it taste like Bordeaux because it was completely unoaked, because the fruit was everything, because it was sitting there in a Burgundy bottle, and bottles create stories and expectations and
dreams.
Create realities and dreams, as you say. So again, that was an example of the way that terroir is now beginning to become more important in Bordeaux than it used to.
Yeah, and to add to this, remember when the public was tasting these wines a couple of days ago, it was, voted as one of the best wines of the night.
That's right. It was in a flight of, five different wines.
Yeah, including Cru Classés, yeah.
Including Cru Classés, including some classic vintages.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we took the votes on which wine people had most liked, that was the wine that won. Amazing.
Was it only Bordeaux?
It was only Bordeaux.
Only Bordeaux,
Yeah.
Impressive.
So Bordeaux is a monster. It's a Titanic. It's a liner. It's going to take an awfully long time to turn it around and point it in a different direction. But that process is underway. We might also mention, even at the top level, it's underway. For example, Chateau Lafite Rothschild nowadays is run by Saskia Rothschild, a young, completely normal person, to all intents and purposes, not a grand aristocrat in the old style anymore. And they own Chateau Riesec, for example. And she's completely changed the way, the labelling of Chateau Riesec. It's now only sold in a different shaped bottle with a completely modern label. And ditto, the dry wine of Chateau Riesec. If you look at the dry wine of Chateau Riesec sitting on a table, it looks like a Loire natural wine now, almost. That's really quite daring. And that's from the very top of the tree. So I think these messages are beginning to filter in.
Yeah, and also during my last trip to Bordeaux, I noticed how much actually the producers in the domains were talking about the terraces. This is quite a new thing in Bordeaux, but it has kind of gotten into their DNA. Everybody mentions we have a terrace 3 or terrace 4 or terrace 5, etc. But at the same time, some of the chateaus, I will not mention any names, but they would say, we don't care about terraces. So it's, and these are some of the really big names, yeah. So, it's interesting to see that either the terroir is creeping into Bordeaux.
Yeah, but, remember, again, when I wrote the New France book, I went to Champagne and featured a few growers' champagnes and spoke to the large houses. Spoke to Régis Camus at Charles Heidsieck. Terroir, on y compte. That was what he said. We're against terroir. All we want is, terroir of Champagne. That's it. That's all we want. We're not interested in anything else. Look how that region's changed. And that was a liner too. Absolutely. That was a big boat.
Absolutely.
That swung right round. So I'm sure we will see this over the next 20 years in Bordeaux.
So that's definitely not a trend. That is something here to stay.
Well, if you look at Champagne, what has happened in Champagne, I think this new terroir trend is that you're looking into vineyards, into little clues. It has regenerated a completely new interest from the wine lovers. They're like rediscovering Champagne just because of this new influence of thinking in terms of terroir. The whole Grover movement, the whole parcel movement. So I'm sure there are things to learn from Champagne for Bordelais too.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now I guess I will slowly try our boat to row it towards the elephant in the room, which is the prices. But so
yes, let's take it off.
How much was that one? Aigards, was it sort of 700 euros, I think?
Yeah, it's a 700, 800 euro bottle, which is unbelievable. Yeah, of course. But that's a price you would usually pay for a Grand Cru White Burgundy. It's.
I have another Grand Cru White Burgundy. It does not cost as much.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
We can actually maybe
it's
slowly.
probably a Corton then. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So maybe if we want to try this one, we can pour this out.
It is a magnificent wine, actually. Yeah.
This is why I chose it, because I think it is great value being Grand Cru.
We will not spit this one. Yeah.
We can spit.
I haven't seen anybody spitting anyway.
A Grand Cru? No.
What is interesting for me is that Burgundy began as this vigneron, this terroir story, and then became a financial asset very similar to that top-end Bordeaux wines. My question is, can terroir-driven authenticity survive when the top wines can now be bought only by investors rather than wine drinkers?
My feeling is that this is a serious, serious problem. Well, let's just go back and examine why it exists. The whole of the Côte d'Or, that's all of the land from Chenauve and Marcenay right down to Fontenay at the bottom end and the Marange. The whole of the Côte d'Or, the whole of the Côte de Nuit, the whole of the Côte de Beaune, plus the Haute-Côte in each case, all of that land, the 44 villages, the 650 plus Premier Cru, the 33 Grand Cru, all of that land equates to a little bit less than twice Saint-Emilion. One appellation in Bordeaux, twice Saint-Emilion. The scale is unbelievably different. If you look at all of the Grand Cru land in Burgundy, it's only a little bit larger than all of the vineyard land of the first growth, the 5 first growths. So we have to remember this difference of scale because that underwrites everything. A lot of factors played into the extraordinary envolée, the extraordinary takeoff of Burgundy prices. One was the fact that Bordeaux shot itself in the foot in the 2009 and 2010 en primeur campaigns, which were sold at a very, very high price, which were heavily bought by the Chinese. And then what happened? President Xi began his anti-corruption campaign, and it quickly became apparent that those prices were unsustainable. All of the people that have bought, particularly the top-level Bordeaux properties en primeur, saw the price tank, and they're still underwater on some of those wines. If you bought Latour 2009 or 10, you are still underwater on your en primeur price. It's been a complete failure ever since then. And really, apart from 2019, which was sold into the market that was affected by COVID, and therefore the prices were quite reasonable, more or less every Bordeaux en primeur campaign ever since has failed. So the Chinese buyers of 2009 felt very offended by that. They lost face. And immediately they went somewhere else. And where were you going to go? You were going to go to Burgundy. And suddenly Burgundy became very fashionable. At the same time as this whole change of zeitgeist after Robert Parker happened, what region could do precision and freshness and all the rest superbly well? It was going to be Burgundy. So Burgundy suddenly became very fashionable globally as well, with these tiny, tiny amounts of wine available. So the prices inevitably took off. And now we have a situation where Burgundy land, Burgundy Grand Cru land, I mean, there was some land that changed hands recently, justement in Corton-Charlemagne, the wine we're drinking at the moment, for the equivalent of 130 million euros a hectare. It wasn't a hectare, but it was the equivalent of that. How long, if you're spending that on the land, you're not going to see a profit by any kind of normal business logic for 1,000 years. It's just insane. It's lost all touch with reality. And this really is the death knell for family domains in Burgundy. It's also the death knell for people like Aigards and me, and you, Agnes, hoping to buy nice Burgundy from a top Grand Cru for ourselves. It's not going to be possible anymore. We're out of the game. And that's a really, really serious matter, I think. It might not be a serious matter financially because, okay, if you're DRC or if you're Rousseau or whatever, you can sell your wine forever after at crazy colossal prices. And perhaps you can, if you're lucky enough to have very small family, not a large family, you might be able to hang on to it as a family landholding. But anybody with a larger family, there are going to be extraordinary pressures from family members to sell that land. It's going to be very difficult to pass on the transmission. And above all, for anybody young coming, hoping to make their way in Burgundy, unless you're going to go hunting for land in the Haute-Côte or perhaps in, the outer fringes of Marange, you're not going to have a chance to buy in either, because you're going to go to the bank and say, look, I need to borrow €1 million to buy this piece of land. And the bank manager is going to say, €1 million, and the bottle price is, and how many bottles do you make a year? And okay, yes, you'll make a profit in about 800 years' time. No, it's not going to happen. So it's a terrible threat to the region.
It sort of reminds me, I think this was J.J. Liebling. I think he was a legendary New Yorker editor, 100 years ago. He has some great books on drinking, and Lunch in Paris is one of them. And I think his quote was that, and I hope I'm not mistaken, that Burgundy is a lovely thing if you can have somebody to buy it for you. Yes, so I guess, well, he said it 100 years ago, but it's so true today. And I guess the only way we will be able to taste Grand Cru white Burgundy and red Burgundy in the future is to have some connections in the right circles, and that's it.
So if I understand correctly, your argument, it's because of the historic fragmentation and the size of the Burgundy, the structure of the Burgundy, the price increase was inevitable.
Yeah,
I'm afraid it was.
They're kind of
once the world discovered that it wanted to drink fine Burgundy, once Hong Kong enthusiasts decided that Bordeaux was finished and they were going after Burgundy, ditto in Singapore, ditto in even places like Dubai and so on nowadays, ditto in Australia, ditto in the west coast of America. Nothing else can happen. Supply and demand. It's a basic economic law.
No.
All right. But then, so we have seen that in Bordeaux. So during its long period of the steady price increase, we slowly lost a portion of consumers, and the system is now struggling, as you said, with the oversupply and relatively weak demand. So given the Burgundy's recent price explosion, but it is still smaller, so the offer is smaller. Do you see similar pattern emerging? So do we lose the
in Bordeaux?
In Burgundy now. So the reason why I actually wanted to have this conversation, I personally thought that maybe the pattern is similar that in Burgundy, similar to that in Bordeaux. But of course, we have different. The structure is fundamentally different.
Yeah, it is, and what Andrew already mentioned, the fact that top Bordeaux names, and not just top Bordeaux names, Bordeaux just has way more wine. So in a way, there's always going to be somebody who wants to sell it cheaper than somebody else. So you will have a chance to find great wines with great values, and especially older vintages. Right now, there is no better time to drink old vintages of Bordeaux, because they provide way better values than the current and premier prices, for example. So in that sense, Bordeaux is winning Burgundy hands down. Like if you're in the market for mature drinking, for mature bottles, then Bordeaux wins hands down, because Burgundy is so tiny, you never know the provenance. The prices are through the roof. And the chance of disappointment is major chance of disappointment. Yeah. With Bordeaux, it's quite predictable in that sense.
Okay, at this point, I would just like to reach across the table and show you this wine. Now, I mentioned how En Primeur has been a flop. If you're buying top wine in more or less since 2010, it's not true at the bottom level. I am a bottom feeder, okay? I'm not a rich guy, but I love Bordeaux, and En Primeur actually is a great time to buy Bordeaux. You can get some great bargains at the bottom level because things actually are very modestly priced at that level. You can also choose your bottle size. I love half bottles. So I tend to buy, young Bordeaux from great vintages in half bottles. And I'm going to now illustrate to you, I think, irrefutably, the kind of value you can find in Bordeaux. This is from Lalande-de-Pomerol, Chateau Siaurac. Lalande-de-Pomerol, for those who don't know the appellation, you have Pomerol, world famous, glorious wines, my favorite Bordeaux's of all. Can't afford them.
The Burgundy of Bordeaux.
The Burgundy of Bordeaux and many other things. Then you have a little river called the Barbanne, tree-lined river. If you look at an aerial view of, for example, La Fleur-Pétrus, looking across towards the Barbanne, immediately there are vineyards the other side. That's these vineyards, just the other side. So, okay, it may not be at the same level, but believe me, it's not at such a different level either. This is 2022. What a vintage. I've only just begun tasting it. I'm so impressed. I've tasted every single of the 4 or 5 half bottles, different properties I bought from 2022. Agnes, have a guess how much that cost me, that half bottle. En Primeur, finished, delivered at home in France.
I don't know.
Just have a guess. What would you
half
pay?
Bottle. I would pay definitely around 20-25 for a half bottle.
Yeah.
I would be happy.
Yeah. This cost me €8.46.
Crazy.
Okay? Even in a half bottle, that will age for 10 years beautifully, and it will be better after 10 years than it is now, except I'm so greedy I'm going to have drunk it all before then. It's just the value you can find in Bordeaux at that kind of level. I'm not talking about AOC Bordeaux from Entre-deux-Mers or anything like that. I'm talking about really people who are trying very hard. Chateau Latour, for a while, was invested in this property. It now belongs to an insurance company. But for a while, Chateau Latour bought into Siaurac. I think they had an interest in it for 4 or 5 years during the last decade of the century. So this is, and Lalande-de-Pomerol is like Côte de Castillon, like the best parts of the Médoc, is thought to be very much an up-and-coming region. And this is $8.46 for a half bottle. It's amazing. I'm now going to open it and serve you some, but Aigards, I don't see that you can get that value in Burgundy anywhere.
No way.
A half bottle of Burgundy at $8.46, it would have to be AOC Bourgogne Maxi from big flat lands, across the road.
Or little Beaujolais or something,
Yeah. But, any village wine.
Yeah.
What's a village wine going to cost you now? A bottle of Chambol. I see them on London restaurant lists for £500. A bottle of village Chambol. It's mad. It's insane. So for me, there's just no comparison, if you're a clever buyer of Bordeaux, between the two.
So I will ask the next question while you open the bottle, but I guess I already know the answer now. I have written it here. If Burgundy top wines, not only top, but if Burgundy wines become unreachable for all, but the wealthiest collectors, could we see Bordeaux, not Burgundy, that reconnects with drinkers?
It's a good
Stranger
question.
things have happened.
Yeah. Good question, yeah. Well, it might go all sorts of different ways. One way is, of course, as you said, that people reconnect with Bordeaux, and in a way, it's already happening with what I mentioned, especially with old, mature bottles, which you can really find for affordable money. But at the same time, as we discussed in the beginning, people are no longer divided just into Bordeaux and Burgundy palate. They might as well go somewhere else, which could be the case. As ourselves, we just discussed, we've traveled, from Burgundy to Piedmont, for example, yeah. So if you are in a kind of a Burgundy palate thing, so I don't know. So yeah, it could go both ways. But what Andrew said, we will certainly lose. We will have possibly generations of people who have no idea what Grand Cru Burgundy really is. Because why would they even care with these sort of prices? It's the barrier of entry in the beginning is just so high. It's just that you can't even get it served in a wine school anymore.
Yes.
So it's so how can you even get access to it? So
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's possible that there could be a rediscovery of Bordeaux, but I do think the Bordelais themselves need to start telling their story in a completely different way.
yeah,
They need to realize that they've completely blown their communication with the people that matter, with the gatekeepers and with the enthusiastic drinkers who are going to champion their wines and show them to their friends and have fun with them and all the rest. So they need to reconnect with all of those people. But if they could do that, and if they can sell the wines in a different way and talk about their stories in a different way and excite people all over again, then the value is amazing. Honestly, there is no region for me anywhere in the world that at this kind of level offers the value that Bordeaux offers.
yeah. And one thing Bordeaux has to improve compared to Burgundy, for example, is eating out
Yeah.
in Bordeaux region, because in Burgundy you can find many places, not just Beaune, but in the countryside too, where you can have amazing wine lists and amazing food, and still normally priced wine lists. But Bordeaux is much worse in this scenario, and part of that is we've talked about this before, that the head of Bordeaux is so prosperous and rich, etc., but the body is so weak, weak and starving, and that happens if you go to Pauillac, for example. It seems like a very nice but mediocre and poor town. There are not many places to eat well in Pauillac, for example, which is a central town, full of the top crew classes, but there are not even a single good restaurant. There are mediocre ones. Whereas in Burgundy, you can drink and eat really well, actually. Yeah.
And land in Pauillac is worth 2 million euros a hectare, compared to land in Entre-deux-Mers, which is worth 10,500 euros a hectare.
Yeah.
There's no reason why that should be the case. This wine is obviously it's travelled from France, so it's a little bit shaken up. It's still very young. It's quite sweet on the nose, but
you can right away feel the 2022. Yeah,
2022, and that lovely blackberry fruit that you get with beautifully ripe Merlot in an interesting place. Lovely intensity.
It's lovely. I had that word in my mind.
That is, possibly, the best you could get for €8.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not a forbidding wine at this stage either. It is a wine that you can drink relatively young. Anyway, that's...
Thank you for this. Yeah, super.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome. But it's just to underline the fact that there is definitely great value to be found in Bordeaux if you look.
Yeah. Before we move to the next segment of questions, and that's the last one, I promise. I just wanted to briefly explain the wines that I chose, the Burgundy wines. I maybe took at some point personally the price increase with Burgundy, because they simply became out of my reach, and it was really, as a wine lover, it's painful, because you want to try these wines, you want to understand and taste what is this all about, when you read in the books and you read in the articles, and you simply cannot do that. You have to choose, either you pay your rent or you buy a bottle, and it's just made no sense for me. But I respect these two producers dearly, because first of all, at the moment when all the prices were, when I received allocations every year, so Pierre-Yves, Colin-Morey, they never increased their prices, or if they did, it was almost non-existent, like 1% or something. So it is the secondary market where the prices go up with them. So I respect this producer there, and they're called producer. And then Domaine de Montille, they are amazing, because at some point they actually dropped their prices, and for specific labels even by 30%, which I also respect dearly. And I think that kind of shows that they look at what market is doing, and how market is responding. And before our interview, I interviewed Jean-Pierre Durand. He is the manager of the Ada Vini. And he basically said that Bordeaux must be drunk. You have to open the bottles and you have to drink them, because this is what is done with Burgundy. We open the bottles and we enjoy them. So you always get, the demand is always high. And I think that's the case with these producers. They're making sure that their wines are not financial asset, but they're opened and they're drunk.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing these.
And the Corton-Charlemagne is a lovely wine. We were lucky enough to try some other Corton-Charlemagne yesterday and to think about it. And it always has this wonderful structure and a sort of calm, gentle, settled, beautifully organized flavor. Lovely, to use the modish word, symmetry to it. This has clearly been barrel fermented, and the barrel fermentation is really, it's quite a young wine. This won't be true in 10 or 15 years, but at this stage, for me, the barrel fermentation is so successful, it's really a part of the pleasure of the wine too. So I'm really enjoying drinking this. How much does it cost, Agnès?
So around 200.
Around 200, okay.
It is, of course, still ultra premium priced.
I can't justify, in relation to what my wife and I earn and our children's needs and the family needs, I can't really justify. I did a couple of years ago buy some 22 Burgundy Bon Premier Cru that in the end cost me 66 euros a bottle. That's absolute total limit. I can't really go beyond that. It's not appropriate for me to do that. It would be irresponsible for me to do that. So wine like this is out of my bracket, but it's lovely, and I can't say it's bad value because it will provide a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, and actually,
if you can afford it.
Those 200 euros are the entry price of any white Grand Cru Burgundy.
Yes.
It's possibly the best value among Grand Cru white Burgundies. I'd say, and to think about it, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just the cheapest white Burgundy Grand Cru you can get starts at 2+ 100 euros. It is crazy. Yeah.
And if I can be allowed to mention another region, I would like to put in a word here for Alsace, because to me, in 200 years, Alsace will be a second Burgundy. We're just on the threshold of beginning to understand what terroir can do in Alsace. Alsace is lucky enough to have a really strong cohort of deep-thinking, progressive, brave wine growers. It's also on the verge of a whole new horizon of wines which are made from complantation, from blends and so on, not the single varietals that we've all been used to. We're also on the verge of discovering all the individual parcellaires within the Grand Cru. That's just beginning to happen. We're perhaps on the verge of having Premier Cru in Alsace as well. And to me, you can find wines of this quality in Alsace. Of course, they'll be different because it's a different place and it's different varieties and so on. But you can find quality of that order in 40 or 50 euro bottles, no question. They're providing that kind of intrigue and pleasure. And I would also say probably from Anjou in the Loire too, from not just from Savonnières but from Anjou Blanc. Many of the most progressive producers in Anjou Blanc are also, and Saumur, also producing serious white wines which can perform the same kind of function as this can at table, again for sort of 50 or 60 euro price point, perhaps up to 80 in some cases in the Loire. But there are alternatives.
Yeah. So in a way, this discussion should have been Burgundy versus Loire, or Burgundy versus Alsace, or.
And then we'd have talked for 4 hours instead of an hour and a half or whatever it's going to be.
But yeah, it brings back to the original point that it is not necessarily about just Bordeaux and just Burgundy anymore. It's
and that's just within France. Of course, once you introduce all the countries of the world, New Zealand, California, Oregon, all those other places, then the pictures.
South Africa,
yeah, South Africa too, yeah.
So the last chapter I wanted to talk to you about was the sustainability in both of these regions, because of course if we have terroir-driven wines, then there's terroir to be saved. You just cannot farm the land endlessly. And I want to introduce a maybe controversial thought, which we might not think before, because when I started to study about wine, Bordeaux was the region where you said that organics and biodynamics are very difficult, because of the high rainfall and moisture. So my thought would be, because Bordeaux properties are larger, they can experiment now with agroforestry, for example, fallow periods, things that are almost impossible for Vigneron and Burgundy when they have like 0.3 hectares. So does this mean that Bordeaux might actually have long-term flexibility in adapting to climate change and soil health, and thus saving their terroir maybe way better than Burgundy can? It's a controversial.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we can answer that. like there's one correct answer to it. Yeah.
We have to wait and see to some extent. But what you're saying about, that's where Bordeaux's size could well play to its advantage. And I have to say also,
and lack of small neighbors.
Exactly, that's really important.
And also remember that Bordeaux is a profoundly maritime region. And in general, I think it's going to be true that regions that are maritime and that are next to large oceans will provide some buffering for the dramatic changes that climate change is going to bring, which won't be true of continental regions. They will be more susceptible, I think, to the starkness of changes in the summer weather, for example, the drought and the heat. The fact that you're a maritime region does provide some buffering against that. That is perhaps also a factor. But as Aigards says, we have to wait and see how things go, because, Bordeaux is, everybody thought that chaptalization was over in Bordeaux. You'd never need to do it again until 2021 came along, that suddenly people had to chaptalize all over again. Everybody thought that frost was a thing of the past, until we discovered that with climate change you get earlier bud bursts, so the buds are on the move earlier. And then we discovered that climate change brings a disruption of the polar vortex in the northern hemisphere. So you get bulges of very cold air coming down into the northern hemisphere in, for example, April. So the combination of earlier bud bursts plus a bulge of polar air down into the northern hemisphere in early April has meant colossal frost problems for both regions. We've also seemed to be in Bordeaux in an interesting pattern whereby the summers are getting hotter and hotter, but it seems to be partnering with very wet springs. This is true of 4 or 5 recent vintages. Notably, the one that shocked everybody was 2018, because it meant colossal mildew problems in Bordeaux. Parma, for example, in 2018 had shockingly low yields, I think 11 hectolitres a hectare or something like that, because they were hit so badly by mildew. Ditto, I think, Chateau, which also does a lot of biodynamic.
Yes, both are biodynamic.
So that was a big shock. So they're having to adapt to that. The thing with climate change is you just never know what's round the corner. But truly, we should also say, to be fair, that both Bordeaux and Burgundy have been so far, broadly speaking, beneficiaries of climate change. Bordeaux had this run I mentioned a little earlier of 2015, 16, 18, 19, 20, 22. Never in Bordeaux's history has it had that many very good or great vintages in such a small span of time. It seems as if for both Bordeaux and Burgundy we're slightly in a Goldilocks zone of climate change, whereby we're not suffering from the worst adverse effects of it yet, but we're benefiting from the extra pulse of heat that every summer season seems to nowadays deliver. And of course, with these very wet springs, it actually has helped the vines cope with very dry patches of summer afterwards. You'd had a very dry spring followed by the summer heat that you had in vintages like 19, 20 or 22. It would have been very difficult, but because of all that spring rain, adverse effect mildew, but if you can overcome the mildew, it sets you up nicely to produce beautiful quality fruit at the end of the season. So the whole climate change thing is very intriguing, not easy to summarize, but so far by no means a catastrophe for these two regions. If you're in Western Languedoc, if you're in the Southern Rhone, it's very different, but for these two regions, no.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I think Burgundy has certainly had a better image of adjusting to biodynamic practices. Certainly, way better image so far. But if you go to Bordeaux now, you will see plenty of top chateaus converting or thinking or playing with the idea of biodynamics. Not just playing with the idea, many of them already into biodynamics certified, etc. And it's not very often. For example, last year I visited Chateau and Thomas d'Uro, that you go to a top Bordeaux property, and you're met with a guy, the top winemaker, not in a tie or anything, with a t-shirt and running shoes and on his feet, and actually saying, please watch out for the cow shit among the wine rows, because they have, all the little universe of biodynamic right there in the vineyard. So the change is phenomenal, actually, if you think about it. So yes, 2014 was their first biodynamic vintage, and if properties like Palmer are showing the way, it's just a matter of time that everybody else will follow. And many are already biodynamic, but just not classified or not showing or boasting about it.
Yes. I remember I was in Petit Clos, and I think it's Fifth Growth. I'm not sure. And they were just so proud with the soil health. They would just dig deep and find all these worms, and just show them out. And it was like, look at this, look at the life we have. And I thought, good for them. And for Vivant, absolutely, they've been biodynamic as well for quite a long time. So we are almost at the end of our conversation, and I just wanted to ask you, is there something that you wanted to talk about specifically and we didn't?
I think we covered a lot of topics, but I think it's important to mention that we love both Bordeaux and Burgundy so much that we actually wanted to stay on the agenda of all the wine lovers. So it is important to talk about this. So yes, please, Bordeaux and Burgundy, if you hear us, change.
Yes, well, what can I say? We've covered the subject, I think, pretty comprehensively. Maybe I would just, in closing, like to go back again a couple of days to some of the discussion we had when we did the Bordeaux dinner on Friday night.
Yes.
And I think it was a question from the audience or a question from one of the diners, and the point was made that the Burgundy is a wine for gamblers because the wager is so high and you're so likely to lose. The odds are so much stacked against you. And then Bordeaux is a wine for accountants. I was very upset about this because nobody's ever accused me of being accountant. I'm practically enumerate before. And therefore, only accountants love Bordeaux because it's so much more reliable.
And it's all about figures and numbers and prices.
Yes, figures everywhere, and the value is good, and it's sound and solid, and you can draw a nice blue line under the bottom, and occasionally you can turn a profit or whatever. Yes, I mean, that's clearly a caricature, but I would say that, one of the things that keeps me going back to Bordeaux is that no other red wine on earth ages so predictably and ends up more beautiful than it began when it was a young wine. This is still a young wine.
Yes.
I'm sure in 10 years it will be a much more beautiful wine. It's already pretty beautiful now, but be much more beautiful in 10 years. And that sort of predictability, that reward of the benefits of age, which really doesn't, for me, apply to Burgundy at all. It's a much more hazardous business. Is something that I'd love to draw our viewers' attention to in closing, because it's truly an asset, and no other red wine that I've come across. There are many other red wines that age beautifully, notably Napa Cabernet, but no other red wine changes so predictably and ends up even more beautiful than it began compared to Bordeaux.
Absolutely. And to add to your point, Andrew, and most importantly for me as a wine lover, you can easily get those mature vintages in auctions in the stores all over Europe, for example.
As you've outlined.
Which is super important, and, because...
there's no way getting Burgundy, older vintages.
It's just impossible, and again, the prices would probably, if they're stored right, they would probably be out of the roof, as we discussed about Bordeaux.
And indeed, I even had a look at, I followed the prices of 2022 Bordeaux, and they're still coming down from the en primeur price. Chateau Canon, for example, which made a beautiful 2022. I had a look at the wine list of Far Vendors before I came over here. 6-bottle case of Chateau Canon, 100 points from almost every critic going. Everybody loves it. Everybody thinks it's a glorious wine. And it was reduced from £770 to £520 or something like that for a 6-bottle pack. Well, it's a very expensive wine, of course, but even so, anybody who's interested in value, even at the higher level, I've outlined how good the value can be at the bottom level, even at the higher level, at the moment, the value is exciting.
Yep. And as that once again highlights how wrong the en primeur and the whole Laplace system is, and that in the long term it should definitely change.
It's failing, and it needs, they need to completely re-gear the whole thing in order to make it exciting all over again.
Absolutely.
So who wins at the end, Bordeaux or Burgundy?
Well, I do hope that the final consumer, that wine lover, wins at the end. At least I think with Bordeaux we're winning right now. If we just care to, pay attention a little bit more. And I do hope that at some point we will also be winners with the Burgundy.
And let's see lots of comments from all the people viewing this, because the comments are always great. I really enjoy looking at the comments. So I'm sure people have a lot of perspectives to offer.
That's absolutely, yes. Please, all the comments welcome. What do you think about the Burgundy and the Bordeaux? Which palate do you have, or which region or wine style do you prefer? And so that's a wrap. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.